I saw North Richmond, I fell in love because it reminded me of my hometown in Arkansas.
So, like, if you came to North Richmond blindfolded back in the 60s, early 70s, and somebody took your blindfold off, you would swear you was in the same little town you just left in Louisiana. We was a straight-up southern town.
To me, that was kind of exotic. That 20 miles from San Francisco, one of the most sophisticated cities in the world, was a community that was, on one level, landlocked. You had to cross the tracks to get there. And once you got there, it was exotic as any place in the world.
North Richmond is home, you know, and it's truly my home. I was born here, born right on Verde Street.
There's one thing I can say and I feel good about. Having been in North Richmond in the good days, the people of North Richmond have always stood the test of time.
Of utmost importance for students to understand that they have links with a very courageous and important and proud past. And if you look at communities like North Richmond, there are struggles that took place that got us all to this point, and we don't give enough credit to that. It is also important for us to remember that when we talk about the history, we are not just talking about a little local community, but we're talking about a community with ties to the national currents of change that took place in this society. And for young people to be involved in the telling of this story, in the documenting of this story, I think really carries on and maintains that tradition of activism.
Before the war, Richmond was a town of about 23,000 people. And in 2 years' time, it got to 108,000. People had come in from the South, both black and white, who were marginal in the South economically, and had worked in the shipyards and made fabulous money compared to what they'd made in the South.
During the height of the 100,000 plus population, most of the blacks lived in public housing. It was either Seaport, Pullman, Harbor Gate, Cutting, South 52nd, or Canal. That's where the concentration of blacks were.
You have to remember that during the war, North Richmond, it was the only place in which blacks were allowed to buy property in the city of Richmond.
We was working, making big time money. I think I was making about 95 cents an hour. Then when I graduated from welding school, I got on the job working in the shipyard, working in double bottoms. And I worked there carrying those big 55-pound welding rods. And after we made our first paycheck, I told my friend, I said, I'm going to buy a home. So I went to the Bank of America downtown and I applied for a loan. They gave me a loan, so I bought the place in North Richmond.
Following the war, blacks anticipated when the shipyards closed, they'd go back to the South. But instead, people said to their relatives, come.
And then everybody just started flocking to North Richmond. Basically, you had people coming in from Texas, Louisiana, and Arkansas.
I was told there were whole streets of people that came from one town in Texas, and they came to the Bay Area and just settled in one block.
It was pretty much a family thing because we were either related or associated with each other in family groups back in those days.
People lived in a more rural environment than they would in Oakland or Berkeley or Bayview Hunters Point or the Fillmore.
And this little area, which should have been industrial area, across the railroad tracks, had been subdivided in 25-foot lots.
They would grow corn and they would grow greens, and other people would have chickens and rabbits. And they would share their food with one another.
Basically, North Richmond was a black settlement. And you just had everybody doing the best they could with what they had because resources were not available to them.
People used to live in trailers, in makeshift housing.
It was like a little Texas, out in the middle of the Bay Area. And if you really wanted to hear the down-home blues, you had to go to North Richmond outside of Richmond.
Music was the thing in North Richmond because they all loved the blues, whether it was Cajun music or the Zydeco or Texas blues. You had people that played this earthy, raw music, this Delta type of music.
And so the blues really thrived because you had Southern people, you had country people, and you had clubs that catered to them.
These clubs began to spring up in North Richmond because it was the only form of entertainment for black.
In the late 60s and 70s, North Richmond was known as Dodge City. We out-rivaled East Palo Alto with the number of murders per capita, and we were known as #1 in this country at that time.
Back in the 70s, there was a downturn in what people felt was a safe environment there. There was a lot of crime or drug dealing or gang activity.
One of the things I found that was really disturbing was the way individuals that were born here in North Richmond had families in Central and families in the South Side, and they decided to have feuds. And you never knew when gunfire would actually start.
If you wanted to buy some drugs, if you wanted to buy a machine gun, it was all available. And North Richmond was an entry point for heroin coming out of Southeast Asia. They used to call it China White.
Back in the 70s, the drugs and the shooting really got terrible there at one time. When people were coming into North Richmond, they were stopping there buying their drugs. And then going back, you had a problem with a known drug, and we called it Sherm, the embalming fluid. All drugs interfere with your mind to a certain extent. But the Sherm really had you gone.
So I saw a community that was in deep conflict, that was beset with neighborhood wars, turf battles, and it appeared there was no way out.
During the 70s, some of the killings were related to, territory or drug activity. It was really unfortunate because a lot of the youngsters used to come and frequent the neighborhood house, the youth and community center that's located in the Los Deltas housing project.
When I was a kid coming up, there was a lot of black-owned businesses here in North Richmond. We had barber shops, we had beauty shops, we had grocery stores.
In the early years, there were a lot of commercial businesses in North Richmond along Grove Street.
You had residential homes on Grove Street. And then there was a little section on Grove Street where there was a pool hall.
This is where they would meet up and they would do a lot of different things.